I want to challenge the idea that's been circulating in diplomatic circles and recently echoed somewhat sheepishly by Donald Trump, the notion that Russia is not ready for peace. And this phrase, while factually correct under Putin's regime, is a profound understatement. It's like remarking that Nero was not quite ready to stop fiddling while Rome burned. In reality, Russia is not merely unready for peace, it is braced for and committed to an eternal war. It's waging not only a war of territory, but a war of attrition, of time and narrative on its neighbour, or its neighbours, and also on its own people. And crucially, it's doing so in the belief that the West, and especially the United States, lacks the stomach for any long haul. So, beginning by dismissing the polite fiction that Vladimir Putin seeks peace on negotiable terms, his former culture minister, Vladimir Medinsky, now a key Kremlin envoy, said it openly: Russia is prepared for a 21-year war, invoking Peter the Great's campaign against Sweden. And that war, incidentally, ended in the obliteration of Sweden as a great power. That is the template that Putin is working from. And Moscow's demands are unambiguous and non-negotiable. Ukraine must be neutralized, disarmed and amputated, no NATO membership, recognition of the annexation of Crimea and the 4 eastern oblasts, no real sovereignty. What Putin wants is not a peace settlement, it's submission validated by international signatures. And Trump has moved from his original bluster that he could end the war in 24 hours to resignation. Maybe Putin doesn't want to stop the war. That's an understatement. That's the understatement of the year, isn't it? What Trump is slowly realising, though, is he can't quite say it out loud, that he is being strung along, that Putin's charm offensive, a 2-hour phone call of vague offers of talks in Istanbul or the Vatican, is precisely what it seems diplomatic theatre to distract, delay and demoralise. And Trump is being used as a prop in the Kremlin's stall tactics playbook, and at every moment the West entertains with that theatre without hard leverage, and that emboldens Moscow even further. You know, it's talking to Moscow is like talking to an insurance company, like talking to Stayshore or something, and expecting that they're going to honour their word, that they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do. They don't. You have to look at the nature of the beast. The nature of the beast is that Putin lies. A lot of insurance companies lie. Stayshore certainly lies. Anyway, you know, it's do you still take out insurance before you go off abroad? Well, yes, I suppose you do. Are you careful about who you use? I think one should be. But how do you know? How do you know? How do you know that what Putin says, or what someone says on behalf of Putin, how do you know that that is necessarily a lie? Well, first of all, because he's got form. And secondly, because he's got opportunity. Russia believes in the power of endurance. It's preparing its population for a long war, economically, culturally, and psychologically. It can just keep layering on the paperwork until one is just exhausted. Statues of Stalin reappearing in metro stations, children being fed a militarized mythological history curriculum. Putin is betting that Western democracies will just get exhausted, divided, short-sighted, they grow weary. And he's not wrong to think so. You know, you get another letter. I was looking at correspondence and stuff today about insurance, and I just want to go to bed. I'm so exhausted with it all. And the same thing about Trump and about Putin, and you just think, I'm so exhausted. Trump and J.D. Vance now talk of walking away. I can understand why. If talks fail, a phrase that must have prompted a smirk from Dmitry Peskov. When your adversary tells you they will retreat unless they get their way, you double down. That's Putin's logic. And why wouldn't he believe the strategy works? America blinked in Afghanistan, Europe dithered in Syria. Why would what would a rush deal look like? It would enshrine Russia's war gains, fracture Ukraine politically, and doom any chance of long-term European security. As former US Ambassador Bridget Brink said, The current policy of pressuring the victim rather than the aggressor is not just immoral, it's strategically suicidal. The EU knows this. Sanctions against Russia's shadow fleet, oil companies, defence industries are escalating, but sanctions alone are not enough. There must be a credible military and economic strategy to ensure Ukraine can not only survive but can prevail. And the alternative is not peace, it's a frozen conflict, a bleeding wound, an emboldened autocracy ready for the next frontier. So when Trump says Russia is not ready for peace, we have to correct him. Russia's actively preparing for permanent war, unless it achieves total victory. The West's challenge is not to coax Putin towards compromise, but to disabuse him of the illusion that time and division are on his side. In 1941, Winston Churchill said, "You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth." Likewise, you cannot negotiate with a regime whose notion of peace is your disappearance. To end the war, we must first accept that it is being waged, not only on the battlefield, but in the corridors of diplomacy, history, and resolve. And we have to recognize that the things we see on paper, the things that Russia distributes, the information that Russia puts out, the Kremlin puts out, are predicated on deceit. And they will accuse anyone else of deceit because that is the language they work from. That's the language they speak. And as I say, it's not so similar. No, it's not so dissimilar to the language of some insurance companies, maybe all insurance companies, I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience of insurance, but what experience I have is not attractive. When somebody says something very clearly on paper, and they say, "Oh yes, we will fund this. Well, yes, we will do this," and then they don't, you have to think there's something fundamentally wrong with the system. It's not just about being late, it's not just about being dilatory, it's about deceiving. And if an organization, whether it's a country or a business, predicates its entire communication on deceit, then of course they assume everything is deceit. And I think you have to base your dealings with people on the idea that people are fundamentally sound. If you assume that people are fundamentally not sound, then there's no real way that you can move forward. It's terribly difficult because anything that's written on paper is automatically irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. You can't hold people to their word. And you can't hold Russia to its word because it means nothing.